Hey, everybody. On today's show, we had a few technical problems, so I hope that you'll overlook that. We had to do my special guest interview through a cell phone, and so the audio is not exactly the best. However, the content on there is fantastic, and what he has to say is super awesome. So please keep that in mind and just know, hey, we're all working from home now. This is how it goes sometimes. Welcome to the Chason Laing Podcast. Amazing people, fascinating topics. I'm your host, Chason Laing. Before we get started, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and click the little notification bell to get access to our shows as soon as they drop. Also, if you'd leave a comment or a review, that would help us out tremendously, and it would make you, a super awesome human. So let's get started with today's awesome special guest. Today with us, Nathan Blair, all the way up in Colorado. And of course, we couldn't start the show without having some technical difficulties. So we're dealing with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's my favorite, technical difficulties. So great.
It is great. So Nathan, you are a filmmaker. I've met you on many occasions out doing film festivals and things like that. So let's just kind of begin by talking about your story, how you ended up doing filmmaking and so on.
Wow. Okay. Dive right in. So I actually, growing up in Colorado, we weren't exactly the hub of filmmaking, the center of that. So it was never something I thought about. Never thought it was something I would do. I loved the movies. Who doesn't? But it wasn't until later. So I was married, had a couple kids, was in college getting a graphic design degree because I was like, I got to do something, to provide for my family now that I've wasted plenty of time. I did to be an adult, grow up a little bit, and I had a graphic design degree, and I was working for a client. I was working mostly for churches and nonprofits, which incidentally made me a nonprofit by association, because you work with churches and nonprofits, and they all ask you to be a nonprofit as well. So I was working for a client, and they needed a video, and I decided that I was going to help them out. I knew Premiere well enough, and they were just looking for something simple. I said, I can help you if that's all you need. I did that, and they thought it was great. I begged to differ. I was like, no, this is awful. But hey, you paid. It doesn't matter. Nothing you can do about it now. And I kept kind of doing more and more video work. Just trying to service and offer the best services for my design clients. And that's when God kind of started to call me into this thing. I'm always very careful when I say the terms calling into that, because it could be taken the wrong way. For me, it was just this, I always felt that I was kind of designed to do a couple things that I feel like God kind of builds people certain ways to do certain things. Like my wife, she could work anywhere and she would be amazing at it. She's just like, I can do anything. I am someone that's like, if I'm not passionate about it, I would be the worst employee ever. I would be like, like an 8-year-old kid being asked to clean their room. This is your job. Oh, come on. I have to. And so it's like, I need to be passionate about what it is that I'm doing. I feel like God had built me a couple of different ways. And I felt like this is one of those things that he was like, this is something that I've asked you to do. So I'm calling you into this. I, of course, said no. I was like, no, I don't think you have the right guy. Not at all. I had already been failing as a graphic design studio owner, and I had a degree. The last thing I was going to do is go home and tell my wife, God's telling me to be a filmmaker. Yeah, and I have no training. I have no skill set. I'd lived in clearly the wrong state to be doing that. But, I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And so I put it off. I kept doing stuff, and it just became such a strong nag, if you will, of like, I know I'm supposed to do this, but I just don't know how to go about communicating that. And I figured if I'm gonna do it, I better know that I know that it's not me getting enamored with the process or me thinking, oh, this should be kind of fun. I needed to know that it was something that God was really laying before me and saying, I'm do this. And so I went all giddy in on it, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna fast. I'm gonna just until God says something. I'm not eating. I don't fast a lot. Clearly, it is not one of my favorite.
It's not one of my favorite things either.
I'm more of an eater. Yeah. So I fortunately God was gracious, and it was 2 meals. I spent the day praying. I was talking to mentors and guys that I really trusted, and I was sitting watching my kids play, and it just is like there was this kind of sense of peace, I guess is the best way to say this. It's like, no, go. This is over me. So I got up and made a sandwich, and I expected the sandwich to be like guilt. You know, when you do something like you're on a diet and you eat something that you shouldn't, and there's like this guilty feeling that comes along with it.
Right.
I was like, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to eat this sandwich, and I'm going to be like, this is going to be the worst tasting sandwich, and I'm just going to be like, that wasn't God at all. That was hunger. I was getting ready to pass out, and I thought it was God. But I ate the sandwich. I was like, man, this is delicious. And again, there was just this piece of this is from Him. And my next question was like, okay, if this is you, do you want me to go back to film school? And again, it just felt very much so that God was kind of leaning it more towards the idea of, I know I want you to do it my way. I want you to kind of operate outside of that. So like Gideon, you can't boast about your skill set. You can't come in and be like, look what I've learned, look how good I am at this. But instead I have to be like, yeah, no, I have no idea how movies are made. I just kind of show up and God's like, yeah, go turn that on. And I really wanted to make sure that was, how it was. And so I read as much as I could, did as many tutorials. I followed all the same YouTubers and Vimeo people everybody else has. I just tried to consume as much as I could because it stopped being about craft and started being about worship. And if God was going to call me in something, I wanted to give Him my best and not give Him kind of, but like everything I had. So that's the very long, complicated, but not complicated story of how I decided that I should do this dumb thing and make movies.
Yeah.
So,
well, but I can totally relate to that because I feel like I just not to jump on your story, but my story is somewhat similar because I also wanted to do some schooling in that because my undergraduate degree has nothing to do with film, and my master's degree again really didn't have anything to do in film. And so here I am doing film, and I kept thinking I need to go and go to the New York Academy or somewhere and get some actual training. But in the end, I think that just getting out there and doing it, actually you learn so much more than, I've had the privilege of going and actually seeing university classes at this point where I've seen them and see what they teach and things like that. And now I'm just like, there's been a few people that have asked me, I'm like, I wouldn't go to film school. Like I maybe business, maybe marketing, but as far as film, you need to get out there and the only way to really learn this craft is to get out there and do it a bunch and learn from mistakes. You learn from mistakes like nothing else. But if you're just, reading books or even watching YouTube and until you've got camera in your hand and you're trying to do something, you just can't learn it. So I think that's part of the fun of it.
I think that's a great point too. And one of the things, because I teach a lot, high schoolers, and I get asked by parents all the time, like, where should they go to film school? Is film school good? Is it college? And my biggest thing is always like, well, what kind of learner are you? What kind of learner are we talking about? Are we talking about somebody who excels in a classroom and they need that structure to really kind of open up what they're trying to do? Or are they an experiential learner? I am the worst classroom learner. Like putting me in a classroom with my ADD, why? It's just a recipe for disaster. But hands-on, I can learn so much more, and then you start diving into some of the things intuitively, some of those gifts that got built into you, where you're like, I don't know why. I've never had to make this decision before, but this just feels like the right decision, and I know this is to work. I know it's going to work because A, B, and C. I can't tell you some of the reasons backing of that. So I can look at it and be like, well, in film school, we learned, I can just be like, it worked in Die Hard, right? So it's got to work here, So there's this element of, figuring it out for me as an experiential learner. But I have counseled others and be like, I think you're better in a classroom, and you should go experience that in a classroom through college, because I think you're going to learn more about the craft for you. Where out here you might get eaten alive because it's just a different environment. So
yeah,
it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. No, and if you, and unfortunately not to date myself, but so, back when I was this age where I was learning, they came out with the new JVC camera that did, I'm getting a weird feedbacky thing here. A JVC camera that did 24 frames a second and 720 HD, and it was a huge deal. It was like, oh my gosh, and this camera cost me like $6,500. And nowadays, kids are running around with iPhones, and it just is like, I just want to throw my head through a window. So learning, the equipment is no longer an excuse not to get out there and learn, because they're running around with that in their pockets. So it's just kind of crazy. Hey, let's talk. Look, man, I don't understand what's going on. I'm sorry if I'm getting a weird. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about your
tech issues. It's just going to be this whole.
It's this whole one.
I'm going to get the internet's going to stop and get frozen in like one of these conversations where I'm like.
If it does, I'll just animate you for later. We'll just add a little jib jab thing on it.
There you go.
Let's talk a little bit about you've got a couple films that have been coming out the last few years, and when I looked at let's take one little step back. Let's talk about Kingdom Sight Studios. Can we do that before we get into individual films? That would be great. So just tell me a little bit about the genesis of when did you decide to make this company, and kind of how did that come about in a nutshell?
Well, about the same time, I felt God was calling into it. So my company for the design studio was Kingdom Sight Design, and then I switched it to studios so that I could add some of the videography element. And I was like, I want to. The vision I had was for a much bigger entity, right? It was this thing down the road that I could turn around and say, I always said, like, I want to become kind of the Paramount Pictures of the Christian space, someplace where we're creating films and I'm not just doing it myself or writing, but instead I'm working to empower others. And I've later switched it from Paramount to it'd be more like Amblin, or something like that, where I want to empower other filmmakers. I want to make the movies I want to make. But I want to kind of create a home for the filmmaker that's not necessarily the mainstream filmmaker type, at least currently. But instead, they have this creative edge. They're telling really interesting, dynamic stories, and they're just going to tell it from their perspective, all with the idea of just creating one step. Asking an audience to take one step closer to Christ in one way, whether it's just ask a question about what do they believe, whether it's a topic, whatever it is. So that's been my passion with Kingdom Sight from the beginning. And then as it's matured, it's really finding my voice as a filmmaker and caring about the stories that I want to tell, as opposed to trying to tell other people's stories, to get a paycheck. To try and find some level of success in this and be like, I'm just going to make this one, and then I'll make the ones I want. This really felt like God was convicting me and going, no, that's not what I asked you to do.
Right.
I asked you to tell these stories your way, through your voice. So go tell them, and I'll worry about where they go. And so that's kind of the long answer for Kingdom Sight. But my ultimate vision is to be able to have multiple projects coming through, being able to empower as many filmmakers from a doc side to a short side to features to episodic, really coming behind them and supporting them and giving them a place, because it's kind of hard to find that place sometimes in this industry.
Yeah.
It feels like there's the giants, and then they're like nobody. So just trying to find that would be really cool.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I think it was the first time I met you we were at ICFF. I think you were screening the high school story film that you did. Yeah, a high school story. And I believe you were filming that there. And I remember you coming into, I've never had this tech issue before where I'm getting like some sort of weird, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, you came in to screen your film, and then all these high schoolers kind of came in, and they were filling in the seats around me, and then I was like, who are all these people in the movie? Like, what is happening here? I'm so used to going to things and like nobody's showing up. So you had this whole entourage of high school students come in, sitting down for your film. And I was like, what is it? And then like some of them were helpers, some of them were in it, some of them were, supporting. And that's when I kind of learned that you had this, I don't want to call it a technique, or maybe it's more of a strategy would be a better word, but you regularly work with younger students, kind of throwing them in the fire, so to speak, to say, hey, you're going to learn how to do, this part of filmmaking. You're doing this and you're doing this, and you've done this, and you've actually had some good success with it now, because you've been doing it. Like that one was a handful of years ago, but since you did that film, you've done 1, 2, 3, 4 more films plus Fragment, which is a series. And so just tell me a little bit about your strategy of working with students and how that works for you.
Well, I wish I was smart enough to call it a strategy. I wish I could be like, I thought this thing up, and I was like, where can I get free labor? It was more like just trying to create films that God's put on my heart, things I would want to see. When we were doing High School Story, I kept coming back to this idea that the thing that was in my head was, how do I create relevancy in God's Word for high school students? Because that seems to be this disconnect of, why are kids leaving churches? Why are they're not, it feels like the Bible becomes this thing that happened really long ago, has no connection to today. And I was like, what is, it was just all my heart. And then it kind of, I was like, you know what? 80s films were super relevant at the time. Again. And so I was like, I love these films, and John Hughes is brilliant at these high school films that connected and created kind of awareness for something. And so I that's where I had the idea of High School Story. And I'm here, right? I'm in Colorado. I have no idea that, agents and managers and talent people and all that sort of stuff exist. I was like, I'm just going to make it here with who I have. And so we did an open casting call, and I thought, I'm going to have to sell this thing to somebody, because the other films I've done, the first question every studio asks is, who's in it?
Yeah.
What they're asking is, how easy is this going to be to sell? And I'm always like, no one you know. I mean, I can tell you there's people in it. You're going to know none of them, but they're really great. And so I thought, I'm still going to be in that boat because I have no money. So I thought, if I were to try and create like a TV show akin to something like a American Idol, or where you kind of get to know people a little bit beforehand, and then you could sell that to like a network, and you could release that to kind of build up some awareness of who people were, that might help. So we had 5 open auditions, casting calls, just anybody could come. And we had, I think we had 200 something people come through over 5 days, and it was crazy, plus callbacks, and we're just all local people. And that, I think at that point, that's where God kind of kept going, this is something I need you to do. I want you to think about this next generation, because I had so much fun on set. I had so much fun being around the energy of high schoolers and young people and young filmmakers. There's just a different energy that comes along with that. And I thought, you know what, if my mistakes teach them anything, it is miserably gives them any type of okay, don't do it that way. He's awful. I'm going to change how I'm going to do it. At least I can do that. And that's just led through this process of wanting to find the really great talent that looks like, or just wanting a break, don't even know that they can do it because, they live in a place that's not possible or whatever. And that's kind of working with those young filmmakers. And, like I said, I teach. So I teach a homeschool group. I teach film and photography and script writing and stuff to like out in a homeschool parent partnership kind of thing. And so I have a lot of students that I work with that. And then that led to Crosswind Productions, which is the nonprofit that I have. Cool sweatshirt.
Yeah, and I like the shirt.
And so, yeah, these are the most comfortable sweatshirts. Like, I'm not a big sweatshirt person, but this is like, it's like filled with like baby's lamb's wool or something. It's like, it's perfect. But so that's what we do with the nonprofit is just try and encourage, inspire, train up, and create content for the next generation for different demographics. And so to call it a strategy, I think is kind of like Machiavellian of me.
Well, it might, maybe. Yeah, no, I mean, but I appreciate it. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm not trying to cut you off or anything, but I mean, I think so. When I was in high school and stuff, like I started learning cameras then, and you know, there was nobody around to show me anything. Like I was just learning it as I went. I mean, my first film that I ever edited was by splicing 2 VHS tapes. Like I had 2 different VHS players, and I'm like literally stop, you know, going. I'm like DJing that thing, and it was so amateur hour, but there was no one around to teach me. So on the one hand, you're providing that to people who may not have an outlet, because filmmaking is a team sport. You know, there's no stars. You have to have the team or else it doesn't work. And then 2, so you're providing that, but then 2, you know, it works kind of in your advantage because especially indie film, you never have the money you would like to have to work with. So you always have to have, I don't think I've ever done any projects that have not had volunteers that were just there to learn and that were coming for free or making very little. And, you know, if you can figure out a way to make something that is quality, make a good story, by using that, it's kind of, you know, both sides then are winning because they get the experience of being a part of something that was bigger than what they could do. And then you're getting the help that you need to create something as well. So, I mean, I would loosely call it a strategy, but at the same time, you know, I see what you're saying for sure.
Yeah, no, I think what's really cool is looking back at it, I can look at it and I can see what God was doing with that and why that was so important. And I've totally clung to it, right? And every professional that I've worked with on any film coming forward, I'm always like, so I call it, I have a teaching set. I never turn away students. I'm never going to be like, I'm sorry, what's your resume? I'm like, if you want to come and learn at the hands of these people, let's do it. So whoever comes to set and works with me, I'm always like, this is what it's going to be like. Your crew that you normally would be like, these got to be experienced, are going to have no experience. But I promise you, by the end of it, if you pour into them, they will vastly exceed your expectations because they're hungry. They want to learn. They're ready to work. And, you know, if we can, as an industry, start creating a place for our young creatives, as these really great filmmakers, and stop losing them, I guess is the term, to a Hollywood industry that just appreciates them more, man, that's going to make a big difference because that's who's going to be making films next. And we've got to empower their voice. We've got to say, hey, go make your own stuff. Here's a way to do it. How can I get behind you and help you? Come learn here, and then let me come on set and learn from you. And so yeah, it's become quite a passion for me. It's always wanting that open set. So.
Well, that's awesome. Well, let's talk about another way that you've kind of done a different approach, and I relate to you again. You and I have a lot in common. We got the beard. You're in Colorado. I'm wearing a Colorado hat. We make films. It's interesting.
It's almost like we could be siblings. You know,
we probably could. We could probably fool some people. But
so that's a funny story. So you put out Sheer Pandemic, and I had people come to me and be like, "Did you?" I was like, "It's not me. It's not me, guys. It's not me. It's the completely different guy, not me." And we should do this because apparently in the Christian film industry, you have to be a brother to get certain rights. So we're just gonna call each other brother, and we'll just change it to like Kingdom Sight Brothers, and then all of a sudden,
the doors will open.
That's it, magically poof. Everything that's been holding us back has been solved.
Yeah, no, it is funny because in sheer pandemic, one, I had grown my beard out as long as I could for COVID. So it was about the same size as yours. And then my character had glasses. So so yeah, it looked a lot like you, man. But so sheer pandemic, and that's kind of going where I'm going. Sheer pandemic, we filmed that because COVID hit and everything shut down. There was no film happening. There was nothing happening. Like our entire neighborhood was dead. No one was driving. No one was doing. It was crazy how the world just stopped, and especially in the filmmaking industry, it was just like, stopped. And if you were trying to do any kind of low budget stuff, they were trying to implement all these COVID rules. And at the time, I mean, if you recall, it wasn't just like they didn't know what to do, so they were just throwing blanket everything. Like, you basically have to wear a suit when you're not when you're on set. I mean, just like you got to spray everything constantly, and no one knew what to do. So I was on a walk one day, and I was talking to my wife, and I'm like, we should make just a film about the funny things that are happening. And she's like, well, you can't make fun of the virus. I'm like, no, I don't want to make fun of the virus. I just look at the ridiculous. Like, we're doing things that we never thought we would do. Like, have you ever seen people fighting over toilet paper before? I've never seen this. This is unbelievable. And then I got on, like, there were people scalping it on Craigslist, and I was like, I cannot believe people are selling toilet paper on the internet. So I had this funny, I was like, we got to do something about this. And my wife was like, you've realized it is still COVID, where are you going to get people? I'm like, no, we'll just film a nothing production, and I'll just call up all my people that are like right here, and I'll just say, hey, let's do something. Let's make a film right here. We'll just go out. Like, no one is anywhere. Like, we can just go anywhere and there won't be anybody there. So it's perfect timing. So we went out during COVID, and we ended up making this ridiculous little film. Meanwhile, across the country in Colorado, you had a similar idea of your own, because like Fragment came out around that time. I don't know how that all went down, but you were also making something at the time that you made. I think was it 8 episodes, 6? How many were the original?
Three 10-minute episodes. Yeah.
Okay, so you made 3 episodes, and then now, I don't know if we could share this, but I mean, you're about to start doing the same thing, correct? Can we share that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, good. So your Fragment is gonna is gonna be a bigger series, and it's gonna be going to PureFlix here pretty soon. And so, like, it's funny because like this little thing is now growing, And so, tell me a little bit about where did you come up with that idea, and just the genesis of that. I know your wife was in it. My wife was in sheer pandemic. It was hilarious just seeing I guess this is what we do.
Yeah, that's right. Mine wasn't funny though. You did a much better job with the funny. I went to the serious tone, but so it's funny as we were coming down to as lockdown was coming through. I just remember waking up one day and having this thought of, this is one of those moments. This is one of those moments in history where somebody's going to not view this as anything other than an opportunity. People are going to go, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to do this. What can I do with this? And I was like, I want to do something about that. I want to feel like I'm taking this as an opportunity. And so I actually just made a post on Facebook, and I just said, all right, I'm just going to challenge some of my filmmaking friends. Let's do like a little contest. Let's just create content for each other to watch, and something you've always wanted to try, even if it's just terrible. Let's just work on stuff and share it. And then we're kind of like, I was just thinking it'd be a way for us to watch something new, stay current, and keep working on things. Because I had an idea that I was like, I think this could work, but I wanted to actually try something.
Yeah, I remember seeing these posts and people were commenting on it. And in fact, I was thinking the same thing. I just couldn't make my brain shrink. I kept thinking it, in bigger format. And I'm like, I just couldn't get my brain around it. But a lot of people were jumping on that post saying, yeah, let's go make some little stuff.
Yeah, and that little post, I ended up partnering with Laura May at Christian Casting. And she was like, you know what? I've got something. And we talked. And in I think it was 36 hours after I made that post, we had the Quarantine Film Festival. We had a domain name. We had a logo. We had and Brian Yeager, Faith-Based Casting, was building us an app. And it went from this little idea and became the Quarantine Film Festival. We had, I think by the time we were done, I think he said it was 3,500 registered users of the app worldwide, We had over 400 films submitted because we didn't charge anything.
Right.
And I was like, let's just watch through it. And then it was like, every day we kept going, it kept going like, we didn't think through this. And I had to remind them, I was like, guys, we didn't think this was ever going to be a thing. So like the infrastructure is woefully unprepared for this. And we know that, but that's cool. It's cool to see what happened. I mean, we had stuff that was from France, we had the Middle East, we had Russia, we had films coming from everywhere.
Yeah.
And they were making it specifically for this little quarantine film festival. And I just thought that's just so cool how that together. And we had stuff that come in and we'd be like, yeah, that didn't adhere to the idea. I don't know that they read the guidelines, like it's got to be PG-13, it's going to be community or language. And so it was like we had to screen all of these things. And three of us I would just go in and be like, okay, I got to screen 40 of these films and spend the next 2 hours going through it and writing notes and approving and not approving. And some of them were hilarious, and some of them I was like, that was made 8 years ago. I don't think that's what this is. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so it was a really interesting time. But for me, I was like, I wanted to create something, and this idea that we can be more creative in our storytelling as a Christian industry in a whole, and really dive into communicating a very Christ-centered message, but not staging it in the Sunday morning church environment, and then be like, okay, our movies are essentially church Sunday skits, but with film.
Yeah.
It's different this way. And so I just wanted to create something that was tense, take advantage of the time frame, which was the idea of, the lockdown and what that would look like. And so that's where Fragment came from. It was one of what would happen if a guy got left behind, and the world, like masses of the population went missing. And that was his whole concept.
Yeah. And your film, Fragment was your entry into the festival, right? Even though you were kind of running it. So, but it was still your kind of contribution to it.
Yeah. I could win because they would have called it conflict of interest or whatever.
Yeah, a little bit.
In my heart, I won. I think I did good. But I was like, I had put this thing up in my family. I told my wife, I was like, I want to do this. And I was expecting her to be like, good luck, Sparky. She's like, okay, let's do it. My kids came in and I mean, we had nothing, right? No,
right.
Couldn't be around each other. And so I would end up writing this thing with the idea that I'm the only one going to be on camera for the most part, which is terrifying because of the actors that I know. I'm not sure I would be the one I would pick.
Right.
But I was like, there's nobody else. And I had to shoot it myself and light it, and I didn't have all of my gear or anything. I was like, I'm going to do what I can. I love a good flashlight. I have a box of atmosphere in the back. We're gonna go for this. And I wanted it to be as tense as I could. And I realized after I got done watching it and kind of putting it together, I was like, this is better than it has the right to be.
Right.
Like this shouldn't be this good. But it felt really good. And I was like, I mean, it's got holes, but I was like, I was like, not just proud in the sense of like, look what we did, but I was like, this is a really interesting story. And so I was releasing them on YouTube, and one of the comments we got, and this is one of my favorite stories because it's such a conviction moment for me, because I want to create stuff that reaches into the world of people who aren't already believers. Right. I want to be more evangelical with that. But in order to do that, we have to be able to take a genre and use it as a language and say, hey, here's a sci-fi film, here's a horror film, here's a, whatever, right? And I had released the first episode or whatever, and some guy came on and commented, and he said, this is why I subscribe. This is good stuff. Good stuff, man. And I was like, I got to take it down. That's not. And then it was like, God goes, no. That's exactly the point. That's the whole reason you're doing this, was to reach this guy that was just, I love these types of stories. And he has no idea that he's sitting here watching a Christian series. And at the end of it, he's going to be confronted with what he believes, but not in the standard traditional, like, where's the altar, end up in church kind of thing, but more of the like, wait, are they talking about like Jesus. And that's what I was hoping for. And so that's what Fragment was more exciting to me about, was the idea that people were watching it and enjoying it and being terrified by it, all with the right like mindset of like, this is kind of scary on so many levels. And I was like, I know, it's fun.
Yeah.
And so that's where Fragment came from, was that, you know, kind of the similar thing you're talking about. I was like, why not? Let's use what's happening in the world today to do what we do, which is tell stories and communicate something.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, well, you brought three things to mind. I'm going to try to get through all three of them because there's just so much to talk about here. But no, the thing I love most about what you did with that Quarantine Film Festival is that it's like the opposite of what was happening in the world. Everybody else was isolating, getting away from everybody. And then you make a thing that's like, nope, we're all together. We're going to do this all together from all over the world in one place. And there's unity, and not only unity, but there's like community there, you know, and which is the opposite of what everyone was being told to do. And I love that. I love the fact that you're trying to make something that, you know, like you said, has a Christian message. And I think for me, that's always the most difficult thing to do, is to make a film that has a story that is not super preachy, because the Christian films get very written off as they don't know how to tell a story. It's like message. And you're doing the opposite of that. You're like, well, let's tell this story. And then, you know, yeah, sure, there might be Christian themes in here, and it might be a Christian message in here, but like, that's not why you're watching it. You're watching it because it's a story. And so I love that. I'm a huge proponent of please put story first always, and then let your, you know, worldview get in there however else that you're going to do it with, you know, message, but that can't be first. If it's first, it comes off and people write it off. But and the last thing is just a statement to, you know, the ability to turn around and put out a festival and put out Fragment in the speed that you did is because you're so lean. You run a lean thing. You know, you can just go and run this thing and do it. If you were in a company and you're like, hey, guys at, you know, Paramount, I want to make this film right now about this thing, it would have 50 levels of bureaucracy. By the time that they got the film made, the COVID thing would be over. But I guess right now it's just like the rest of our lives is just going to be COVID variants. That could be a whole film to itself.
3 years to flatten the curve. That's
3 years. Oh my gosh. Anyway, but not to get off on that, but just they would not be able to do it. Whereas you're like, no, we can have, you know, in 48 hours, we can have an entire film festival, and we can be making these things right now that are current while everyone is locked in their houses. We're putting out content, and the rest of the studios are all like stuck with how we're going to even make content. And so I love that about it. I love the fact that it can just go on a whim and say, I have a great idea for a story, and I'm not going to let these things get in my way. To make it and put it out in the world. So I applaud you for all of that.
Cool. Well, thank you. What's cool is too about the Quarantine Film Festival is we had people doing stuff that my big challenge is like, if you're an actor and you've ever thought about writing or directing, do it. Like, this is the perfect time to do this stuff. And so we had actors going out and making stuff like Jen Chandler. She made a short film for Quarantine Film Festival, and somehow got out, and they're like doing news, like reports on her film for the Quarantine Film Festival. And they're like, it was sent to me, and I was like, wait, what? This is not newsworthy. We're just a bunch of weirdos making stuff in the middle of lockdown. Why are we? Okay, that's great. And then I had people who are making stuff and they're entering into other film festivals, and it's placing and winning in that. And I'm like, that's just such a cool thing that even in the middle of this, God still inspired creativity, and people were still like, I still have stories to tell. And I always love hearing the stories of people like, I wasn't going to write. I always had this urge to, but I never had a chance. And so I thought, why not? And I started writing. And now I've written, you know, these films, and I'm working on this project. And it was a cool jumping off experience for so many people. And I was just cool that I got to be a part of that, just to be involved in that in a way, you know? So it's kind of funny. It's one of those weird things where I'll bring it up and be like, so I did a thing called the Quarantine Film Festival, and I always have to wait because I've had the randomest people be like, oh yeah, I saw that. And then other people will be like, the what? I'm like, okay, yeah, it wasn't as important. Yeah. We're not going to have that conversation. We're going to have this conversation where I look like a knucklehead. Okay. now I know where I'm supposed to be. Let's have this conversation now. But yeah, I really enjoyed that process considerably. It was exhausting, but it was so much fun.
Well, that's awesome, and I'm running out of time, but there's a few other things I want to hit, and then we can briefly just cut. Maybe we'll have to do this again here because I still have a whole lot. We're not even like halfway through the stuff that I wanted to talk about, but it's so interesting. I want to know.
I'm chatting.
Because this is stuff I wanted to know. Like these are really great stories. But let's just talk about in the space of guerrilla film and in the space of Christian film, and we are both. What happens inevitably is you have to deal with criticisms of your work all the time. Like the minute you put it out there, and in our environment, it's so easy to just you get on there and say negative stuff, and people just dump with complete anonymity to just say whatever they want. How do you deal with the negative criticisms that come from wherever they come from, from a wall or anytime you put your stuff out? You have any methods, anything you do, anything you don't do? Tell me about it.
I eat. That's my, I don't know. I think I'm so hard on myself as it is because I want to be, and I put something out the other day about this too, of just like, I struggle so much with natural competitivity. Like I'm so competitive. I used to think I was a perfectionist, but it wasn't about, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm hyper competitive. Like I want to be the best. I want people to be like, that dude's the greatest filmmaker who's ever breathed air. And I know inside I'm like, they're never going to say that, but it's like, this thing is like, I have a drive for that. And so in this industry, I also am horrible at championing other people. And it's so easy for me to tear down because I can look down and be like, guys, come on. And I've taught myself wanting to first be like, I've got to be a better champion and model the behavior that I wish other people were. And so one of the best things I could do is I had to do a film, my very first film, just not great, but it's such a lovable film. Like it's so a first person, like first time filmmaker's film. I didn't know that you didn't have to crossfade everything, right? And so, I'm like, oh, straight cuts, what are those? But I go back and I would read like the Amazon Times like comments and just feel like so rotten. And I've stopped reading those because I'm like, that's just not the audience, right? I guess I have to look at it and go, if I'm doing this for somebody on this earth's approval, I'm doing it all for the wrong purpose. It's 100% the wrong purpose. If I look at this and I go, it's got to be, if so-and-so likes it, then I've made it. I have it. And ultimately I have to look at it and be like, this is where I think, praising God's genius, right? At the beginning, if I'd have gone to film school, I would have had a different mindset. Instead, if God's like, no, you're going to have to need me to get through the days when everybody thinks you're an utter lunatic for trying something. Because people are going to tell you all the time, you can't do it this way, right? You'd probably get this told all the time. Like, well, you can't do that. That's not how it works. Says who? What book have I not read that there's a rule book that says you can't make a film this way? It's just, why can't I? Tell me why I can't do this. Tell me why I can't. And so I have to remember those things because there is the criticism. And I also think God has a sense of humor. I have the love language of words. So words are so big to me. So like my wife she can just make my day, or with a look, she can be like, have a good day, and walk away. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And so being in an industry where they just eat their young is so hard at times. So I've had to learn to kind of, I have to almost balance with, okay, this is what God has said and needs me to do. I can't take that criticism, and I had to learn how to separate good critique from bad critique, like critique from criticism. Critique is, hey, I think if you were to do this, this, and this, it'd make the story shine, as opposed to what kind of idiot would do this kind of thing. And so it's that balance that I've had to work through. So I don't know if that's an answer, but it's kind of like, I wish. So part of me is like, I wish everybody knew how hard it was to make a movie, but then a secret would be out. But it's kind of like, if you had any idea how hard it is and how difficult it is to get a film from thought process to completion and into the distribution on some level, that's years, right? Sometimes years of time, and you're going to take 30 minutes to destroy something. It makes me angry, but I understand sometimes of being like, I find myself doing that.
Yeah.
Catch myself going, okay, buddy, who are you? You with your fancy hat. Let's just, like calm down.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny. I used to, you talked about being competitive, and I used to feel a lot that way. Like I don't know. I don't even know if it was so much that I was competitive as just I wanted to be validated that my stuff was at the top or better than other people's, And then over time, those edges have slowly been, sawed off. And now I'm less, I find myself less competitive to just saying, is it making money? Are we eating at this house? And I'm down to that point now. And I feel like, I really could care less so much of the time, like, if it wins, or like I've won, fortunately, I'm blessed. I have won a lot of stuff. And at the same time, it doesn't really, I feel like it doesn't really go to my head at all. It's just kind of like, well, that's really nice. But then by the next day, I'm already on to the next thing. I don't really spend much time thinking about it. And people don't know how long it takes, like for me, like Breakers, my TV series, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of hours from Genesis to getting it onto, done and onto platforms where people can watch it. And somebody in 5 seconds got on there one day and was like, this thing sucks. I don't know why Hollywood just keeps making the same stuff over and over again. This is the same thing of something else, not worth your time, and done. And at first I read that, I'm like, oh man, if I had this person here, I would explain to him that you're an idiot. but then I laughed and I was like, he thought I was Hollywood. He thought the dude that made the no budget, thing in Texas is Hollywood. And so I got myself a little Hollywood sign, and I am now an official speaker for Hollywood. So if you ever want to know why Hollywood is doing what they're doing, I am the spokesman now for Hollywood. So you have to take it with a grain of salt.
That's awesome. Yeah, because that's what I heard. I heard that you're Hollywood, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait, he knows how to do this? We need to have some deeper conversations, because I'm still just some weirdo in Colorado. We're near Hollywood. That's great.
Well, last question for you, man. Tell me, 1, 2, 3, I don't know, just a couple things that are priceless things that you've learned over your filmmaking career. Just a few things that were like, man, I wish I had known this at the beginning, but maybe you didn't, and you learned it along the way. What are some things that really stick out to you? Like, if I could tell anybody anything, I would tell them this.
No difference between passion and calling. I think so many times people in this industry, they're passionate about film or acting or storytelling or whatever, and they follow that passion, but then it wears out because it's an emotion, right?
Right.
You have to have something deeper than just a passion. Passion's great, but if you have a calling, if you know this is what God got you, and you can look at it and be like, I'm called to do X, Y, and Z, or whatever that is, then that passion fuels that calling, but that calling continues to drive you in the passion. A 16-hour workday, and you're like, why am I doing this? It goes away. And so I would say that's one of the big things, is know the difference in passion and calling. And I think the other thing that sticks out is, it sounds so cheesy, but it's so true, especially in our industry, is be courageous. There's so much pressure to succeed and to compromise in this, or to be like, I've got to look like A, B, and C in order to make it, because I've got kids. Or I get asked that all the time, I'm sure you do too, is like, how do you feed your family? And I'm like, I don't know. There's I do everything, and that's the answer to my question. And I think a lot of that is we have to be courageous. We have to be courageous in the stories we want to tell. We have to be courageous in the faith that we know is so true. You have to be courageous to stand up against people that are like, why are you doing this? You're an idiot. And being like, no, I'm not. We have to be more courageous in our adventurous nature and our creativity, and to trust that if God's, again, called you into something, take courage in knowing that it's not about the absence of fear, right? It's not like, I'm pretty sure there are firefighters that are like, this is terrifying, but I'm still going in.
Right.
I'm still doing this thing. And I think we have to find that kind of courage to stand up against people being like, well, you don't look like one of the other brother people, or your film is, you're doing an action comedy. Christians aren't funny. Well, I don't know. I find them funny. If you ever watched them, so it's like, let's be courageous in what it is that you're doing. I guess those are the big topical things. If you wanted something more industry specific, like it's got to be very specific to an industry, is understand story structure and love story structure. If you love that, so many other things will be solved later on. It's so much cheaper and less expensive, and time can, it doesn't cost as much time to fix it on the computer when you're writing the script than it does any other place. Just fix it there. It's just so much better.
Awesome. Well, dude, I love it. That was great stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up, but I just want to thank you so much for coming out, and we're going to have to bring you back because, again, I have half my questions left. So we'll just do it again on another day. Maybe we won't have so many technical difficulties and we'll be able to figure it out. But I'm so glad we had this conversation because I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this fascinating. So appreciate you coming on and doing this with me.
Absolutely. It was so much fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been the Chason Laing Podcast. You're going to find the relevant links from today's show in the show notes below, including all of Nathan Blair's links, and he's got quite a few of them, so check them out. If you enjoyed our show, please hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell to get access to our shows as soon as they drop, and please leave a comment and a 5-star review. Your reviews help us continue making these episodes, and it makes you, part of the show. That's all for today's show, guys. Go get after it.